Hey, what's up, everyone? So I just did another video, kind of sort of philosophical video, but this video or this Facebook Live, I wanted to talk about an old Louisiana legend, uh, the legend of the rougarou. Um, you might have heard of the rougarou. It's been in some like in popular culture and some of the TV shows. I think it was on like Supernatural. There was an episode or one of the TV shows, anyways. But essentially, the rougarou um, is a Louisiana legend, a Cajun legend, and it originally was called the loup-garou, and it originated from France in like the 1300s, the 1400s. People in France and as well as other societies, they had this natural fear that when something went wrong, it was attributed to a witch or a werewolf or some kind of evil spirit. So they kind of in attempts to explain away the bad things that were happening, they would blame it on a witch or a werewolf. And so just like witches, they had werewolf trials in France where they would actually um, find people that they suspected of being a loup-garou, which translates to werewolf in French, and they would put them on trial and then they would burn them at stake if you were accused of being a werewolf. And so then when the French came to America and they moved to Canada, and then a large percentage of French people moved actually to Louisiana, um, and in New Orleans, that legend of the rougarou sort of came with it, and it had a Cajun spin put on it to where even kind of more legends developed around the story of the rougarou. Now the rougarou, he is sort of like your traditional werewolf, except he's often described as sort of more of like a slim werewolf with sometimes just a human body and the head of a wolf. Um, and you'll find that if you go down south in the Cajun country, um, they will tell you about the rougarou, and they actually fear the rougarou, and mothers tell their children stories of this rougarou creature, um, that if they do something bad, then the rougarou will get you. And it's funny because I actually went down to Louisiana and I passed through there and I stayed the night, and I overheard this mother telling her child, you know, you better stop or the rougarou will get you. And so then I asked someone, I said, what is the rougarou? And they told me, they're like, it's something we fear down here. It's like a werewolf, um, and he's like, everyone's kind of terrified to even talk about it or mention the name. Down here, it's kind of like a big thing. It's kind of like the boogeyman to us. And but one of the ways it's believed that you can tell if someone is a rougarou, um, is they can't count past 12 because of so basically the rougarou is a werewolf who becomes a werewolf by a curse that's usually put on him by a witch or a voodoo priestess, and he has 101 days to basically pass this curse on to someone else, or essentially he becomes a werewolf for the rest of his life. And the only way for him to pass that curse is to draw the blood of another person. Um, and because of this curse, which often associates with the number 13 curses, it's believed that a person who is a rougarou cannot count past the number 12. And so that's sort of how you would tell if a person may be a rougarou. Also, people believe that laying 13 gifts or 13 pennies in front of your door will actually protect you from the rougarou. Um, and the thing about the rougarou, like I said, is it's a story that mothers tell children to kind of keep them uh, in check. and scare them, not to do bad things. Um, but it also, the Catholics kind of, you know, essentially believe in the rougarou, and they have this legend that if you were to do something bad in the time of Lent, which is around Easter, um, like for instance, if you were to go hunting when it's Lent, that's something you're not supposed to do. Then you could be attacked by the rougarou. He would come and get you. Um, and like I said, down south, the Cajun country, they take this legend very serious. There's a small uh, town outside of Louisiana, and I've heard stories that these people believe that this rougarou lives near the village, and they will not go out at nighttime. They're terrified of nighttime, and when you go into this village, it's really weird because all the houses are like the windows are boarded up, and they have like steel doors, and just because it's almost like they're afraid of something getting into their house. Um, but yeah, the rougarou, like I said, is under a curse, and he has 101 days to give this curse to someone else, or he becomes the rougarou. And it's not just a man who can become a rougarou; it's a female as well, and they transform, like your typical werewolf during a full moon, um, and it's sort of like these people do not essentially sometimes know that they're the rougarou. It's believed that they kind of maybe assume they might be it, but they don't actually have recollection of transforming into a rougarou. Um, and even like they have sort of Native Americans that live in Louisiana around the bayou, and they um, they actually also believe in the rougarou, except they call it a skinwalker. And skinwalkers obviously are in Native American culture across the United States, but they have their stories of skinwalkers, which, yeah, yeah, it's scary to think like, you have people who, regular, just people who can become killers and stuff like that, but to think that something could transform into a terrifying like creature and could come after you, that's really scary, Um, and essentially, uh, the only thing that could hurt a rougarou is silver. Once again, back to silver, because that's something to do with the curse. Um, and it basically, so the origin of sort of all werewolves comes from a curse that was placed in 1200, 1200 AD, and it's believed that a witch um, put a spell on a king in Germany, and this king um, was under this spell, or I should say curse, because he had done something to the witch, and um, that because of this curse, he could he would transform into a beast, and his true colors would come out on a full moon, and people would see who he really was on a full moon, and sort of spread down through generations of his family, and then his family would go out and would feast on blood, and it would transfer the curse, and um, so silver is believed to be the only thing that can harm a rougarou or other werewolves. So they're basically almost immortal, I would say, but yeah, and as I was saying, I don't think most people would be aware that they were under this sort of spell. Um, and silver essentially has its roots in ancient times as something you would give to um, break a curse. it's sort of like a tribute, an offering, um, because in ancient times, silver was actually very valuable, and so you would give someone the gift of silver to rid you of a curse or rid you of evil, and but yeah, this is that, like I said, this is a legend that they take very serious down in Cajun country, and so I've heard stories. The one story I heard was actually they it was a skinwalker, but I actually believe it was a rougarou. In the bayous of Louisiana, there's a Native American village, and this young girl, um, she lived on the bayou with her family, and one night her parents went out and they asked her to babysit for um, the her brothers and sisters while they went out. So she was babysitting the kids. They end up going to bed. She put them down to bed and they went in their bedroom. And she was just old enough that her parents allowed her to drink coffee. So she made some coffee and she sat in the living room when she heard someone knocking on the door. Now, her parents told her, don't open the door for anyone ever. So she didn't open the door, but whoever it was kept knocking. And then all of a sudden she heard a loud bang. The front door flew open, and in comes this wolf like creature, half man, half wolf. And it jumped up on the table, and except this wolf like creature, it could talk. And he was saying to the girl, please kill me, kill me. I want to be out of this curse. He was telling her to kill him. And she said, no, I can't do that. I can't do that. So then this wolf like creature, it ran out the door and left. And so um, apparently, when the wolf like creature, as he went out the door, he like cut his arm or something. And so the next morning, she told her dad what had happened. And the dad didn't really like say much about it, but the mom said, you were visited by the devil himself, and you were visited by the rougarou. So about 2 weeks later, the girl uh, was outside and she was walking by like a deck, and she seen her uncle on the deck, and she noticed that he had this cut on his arm in the same place this like creature had got cut, and he just kind of gave her this weird look, and she knew that he was the rougarou that she had seen, and but like I said, you hear with a lot of these stories that these rougarous, they can actually talk. It's not like they're just growling. They can communicate vocally, um, and I think some of them that do realize they're under a curse, they want to be out of the curse. And the thing with the rougarous is they're not as aggressive as normal your modern werewolves or your regular werewolves. Um, they tend to not want to be under the curse, and they really want to rid themselves, and so they try not as much as possible to attack people. They kind of stick to animals and deer, and so you'll often find like mutilated deers and animals that have been attacked by something. Um, and I mean, I've never heard of someone getting killed by the rougarou. I'm sure it's probably happened, but I've never actually heard any stories about anyone dying at the hands of the rougarou. Um, and you'll find sort of this legend of not only the rougarou but a werewolf. You see this throughout the United States. Obviously, as I was saying, the Native Americans, they call a werewolf a skinwalker, one who can transform into a wolf, or they believe sometimes other animals. Um, you have the Michigan Dog Man. In Michigan, they have this legend of the Dog Man, which is kind of like a werewolf, but it kind of alternates between walking on all two to walking on all fours, being bipedal to walking on all fours. In Wisconsin, they have tons of werewolf sightings. The Beast of Bray Road was like a famous um, werewolf hotspot, and still to this day, people talk about the Beast of Bray Road, which they describe essentially as a werewolf. Um, but there's all these different legends and different names for essentially the same creature, and especially you find this werewolf culture comes from places where Europeans sort of originated to the Americas, and they brought with them these legends, and essentially that's where we get the stories of werewolves. Because, like I said, the Europeans, especially like Wisconsin and Michigan, and these are places where um, you have a lot of Europeans that had settled there, Germans and in people from the Northlands, and it's so really the legends originate from Europe, and then they were brought over here to America. Um, I mean, do I believe personally that werewolves exist? Um, I've seen enough evidence to substantiate these claims. Um, seeing like I said, seeing sort of this same legend with just different names, throughout the country, it really makes me believe that people are seeing something, and that it is possible for a wolf-like creature, a hybrid, if you would, to exist. Is it possibly that a werewolf is maybe like some sort of undiscovered animal? Is it possibly that some unknown species of animal that we've yet to discover? Is it, um, is it a curse? I believe wholeheartedly in curses. It could be some kind of curse that's bestowed upon a person. Also, going back to Native American culture, they believe in something called the Wendigo, which is basically a person who would become so consumed by anger and rage that they would turn into a monster. Um, and if you think about it, some of these crazy like serial killers and stuff, they did some really bad stuff, and they were so consumed by their emotions and their anger and their rage that it actually turned them into violent monsters in a sense. So, it's very hard to say, that what exactly a werewolf could be, but um, I mean, there is that theory of a full moon, affecting our moods. Um, you see a lot more crime happen on full moons. You see that just people act differently on full moons. People are restless. I mean, I have trouble sleeping when I don't know if it's just because it's brighter out, or it's sort of, it affects my mood. But you see, and the moon has a lot of effects on the earth, with the tides and um, various things, as weather as well. The moon can affect the weather. So it can affect sort of how we feel, and it can affect our moods, and it can alter how we feel. And this could have been sort of, less primitive people trying to understand psychology and the moon's effect on human psychology. So it is possible that a werewolf is sort of an invention of early um, mental health, if you would, to explain how a person changed during a full moon, or how mental illness could affect someone and affect their moods. And um, but yeah, I do believe in werewolves. I've seen enough evidence. Like I said, I've actually I've suspected that here in town there may be some sort of werewolf-like creature. I hike a lot. I go into the woods a lot, and I do a lot of hiking. Um, I found several carcasses, animal carcasses, deers, that have been mutilated, and I sort of, like I said, I know nature really well, and I know the animals that are present uh, locally, and I know sort of what their footprints look like. I know what their, what predators live in the area. But I've observed sort of footprints that almost look like a wolf, but they're you know 3 times larger than the normal wolf. The wolf that we know in America, the gray wolf, and they're not coyotes. It's not a bear, because we have seen black bears here in Illinois. Um, and it's usually like there's four fingers or toes, I would call them, with claws. But from the footprints, seeing the footprints, I can judge that they are probably 300 to 400 pounds. Um, that they probably stand 7 to 8 feet tall. Um, and that they are bipedal, meaning that they walk on 2 feet instead of four. So some sort of 300, 400 bipedal creature is walking through the woods, and I've documented this with the footprints that I've found, as well as on trees. I have found claw marks. As if something were, bears when they sharpen their nails, and cats as well, large cats, small cats, when they sharpen their nails, they'll scratch on something, like a tree or wood, to sharpen their nails. And I found claw marks up in the trees, 7, 8 feet, 9 feet high, tall. So for some kind of animal to reach that high, it would have to be very large. And I mean, these claw marks are just huge, almost like, an inch thick. Um, and for me, it looks like when you see bears in the wild, that's how they sharpen their nails, is they go up to a tree, and they claw at it. And but I've seen no evidence of it being a black bear. I am familiar with black bears, which we do see, uh, rare instances. We do see them here in Illinois. Um, but definitely, this is not a bear. It's not a coyote. It's not a wolf. Um, because what wolf walks on 2 feet? What wolf is bipedal? And so it leads me to believe that some large predator is living in the woods here. It's preying on large game, and I have to think that possibly it could be a werewolf of some sorts. And one of the neat things that I've noticed is that werewolves sort of vary in sort of size and shape and look, and as you go to different cultures. It seems like the northern werewolves up north are kind of bigger, and usually, they're larger than the Bigfoots found in the south, or, southern part of the country. The rougarou, like I said, is more of like a slim werewolf. And sometimes you hear of like werewolves, the whole body isn't sort of like transformed into like a wolf-like creature. It's like a human body and a half wolf head. Um, but so it makes me think that, uh, is it possibly different curses, or, what's to attribute to the different sizes, and sort of the differences between the werewolves found in the north and the werewolves found in the south of the country. Um, and that's the same as well with Bigfoot. You see variations of Bigfoot. Um, you have Sasquatch, which is in the northwest, which is usually much taller, 8 to 9 feet tall, and bigger. Um, whereas Bigfoot found in sort of the Midwest, or um, in the Northwest, is usually much smaller, 6 to 7 feet tall, um, and sort of a more slim figure. Uh, Also, you see like variations in hair color. Um, the skunk ape, which is found in Florida, it has more of like a reddish hair to it, whereas the Sasquatch has a darker brown colored hair. Um, and that would make sense, because they're sort of the sun would play a factor on their hair color, um, as well as, it's the same as how Norse people from northern Europe and have blonde hair usually, or red hair, and people in southern um, places have darker hair and darker skin, and so it's basically to the darker hair would help sort of the Sasquatch absorb more heat in the colder temperatures. And now there's not variation in fur, the consistency of fur. You would think that if an animal would live in southern, and that would explain, with the rougarou, why maybe he doesn't have fur throughout his body because he lives in a warmer climate. So it would make sense that it wouldn't have as much fur, but I don't necessarily know. But yeah, I've sorry I've went on for a long time about werewolves, but yeah, if there's ever anything you want me to talk about, to elaborate on, you have questions, you can message me anytime, and I'll try and do a video on stuff if you have something you want me to talk about. Just tell me, vampires, werewolves, the Pudgewuggy, the Jersey Devil, the Dover Demon, um, the Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot, any sort of cryptid, or any urban legend, uh, ghost, obviously. Um, so there, I actually heard this really cool legend the other day. Um, there was this video game, and it was called Polymorphous or something like that, or Poly something. And apparently in the 70s, and it was like the um, arcades were almost everywhere. It was like a big time for arcades, and almost every city and town had like their own arcade. So when arcades were sort of prevalent throughout the country, um, a lot of people reported seeing this game appear in arcades called like Polymorphous, or it's like Poly something. And they reportedly would play this game, and it would cause them to lose their minds, and people would end up killing themselves. And so there was all these reports in the 70s of people who would play this game, um, taking their own life, and being driven mad by playing some game called like Polymorphous. And so when they tried to investigate and figure out more about this game, they couldn't actually track this game down, because when they would go to like an arcade to find this game, they couldn't find it in the arcade. The people who owned the arcade claimed they didn't have the game. No one sort of came forward that they developed this arcade game, and it was like after the 70s, kind of, and into the 80s, once arcades kind of died down, this game kind of vanished with it. But I still hear reports of this arcade game kind of, I guess, appears from time to time. Um, but yeah, like I said, if you have any kind of like urban legends like that you want me to talk about, I'll see if I know about it, and what what my knowledge is to it. Um, but one more thing I wanted to talk about, actually. Um, there was actually a black-eyed children sighting, uh, not too far from here, in a suburb of Chicago. Um, Apparently, a lady had just got home from Halloween on October 31st, and she went inside. She kind of like had just gotten off work. She sat down, watched TV. She heard, she heard a knock at the door. She went to answer the door, and there were three kids at her door. Um, and she noticed um, that these three kids were all wearing sort of like black hoods and black pants, and they had their hoodie up, to where it was hard for her to see most of their face. And she noticed that these kids had really deep voices for being, looking like they were only like 12 or 13 years old. So the kids were like, we need to use your phone. They gave her like some story, can we use your phone? Can we come inside? And we need to call our parents. And the lady's like, well, I don't feel comfortable with that. I don't really know who you are. Um, I need you to go because I just don't feel comfortable with you being here. And they said, please just let us in. We need to call our parents. It's important that you let us in. And she's like, I'm sorry, I just don't feel comfortable with you guys coming into my house. And she said, I'll tell you what, I can get my phone and I'll bring it out to you and you can call your parents out here on the porch. And they said, no, no, no. You don't understand. We have to come inside and use your phone. And she said, I'm not going to let you come inside my house, but I will get you the phone. She said, this is your last time. If you want to use my phone, I'll bring it out to you, but you're not coming inside my house. And they said, so then she said, like, their voices sort of got deeper and their demeanor kind of changed. And they said, you don't understand. You need to let us in. We can't come inside unless you let us into your home. Please let us in right now. And she said, okay, you guys are going to have to leave. And one of the children that were at the door, they turned and she could see their eyes and they were like solid black circles. They had solid black eyes. And she said it just terrified her immediately. She slammed the door shut and she said that for like 20 minutes, they were knocking at the door. That stopped. Then she said, so she got tired of the knocking and she went into her bedroom. She was terrified. And she didn't want to call anyone, and have them come out and get these kids in trouble, because she thought they were just some kids playing around. She was terrified about the eyes, but she thought maybe they were just playing a joke, so she didn't really want to call anyone. So she went into her bedroom though because she was scared, and she locked the door. And as she's sitting in her bedroom, she hears banging on the window, and she goes to the window, kind of peeks out, and she sees the three children there just staring in the window, and she could see their big black eyes. And they kind of harassed her all through the night. Um, and then eventually she called her husband, who got off work and came home right away. And he searched the home, and uh, they asked the neighbors the next day, did you see any kids around here? And the neighbors said, no, we didn't see any kids. Um, and apparently she hasn't had any more encounters. But like I said, the black eyed children, that's something very scary in itself. Um, and so basically, the black eyed children are sort of, we don't exactly know what they are. Are they evil? Are they ghosts? Are they extraterrestrials? We don't really know. All we know is that usually it's, 2 to 3 children who look anywhere between like 9 to 15 years old, wearing black hoodies, black pants, um, and usually their hood is over their face so you can't see their eyes and you can't see most of their face. And they either come to your home or they can come to your car and they knock and they want to come into your car, they want to come into your home, and they can't come in unless you invite them in. And apparently, if you were to invite the black eyed children in, then something bad would happen to you. Possibly you would die. I don't exactly know because I've never heard stories of anyone letting the black eyed children inside their car or their home. Um, and that's probably why, because probably something happened to them because they let these black eyed children in. But uh, and obviously there's reports back. Originally we thought this was just like some new urban legend that had just started in the past like 10 years, but we found like there's reports going back to the 1920s of these sort of black-eyed children. um, there was a farmhouse in Kansas where a girl reportedly seen one walking on the street, and she wanted to come back to their home, and the girl was terrified and told her parents. And um, there was sort of a couple communities in the Midwest that were plagued by the black-eyed children during the 20s, the 30s, and sort of this legend has kind of picked back up. We've seen a lot more sightings of the black-eyed children recently. Um, but yeah, it's something definitely terrifying. If you get a chance, look them up. I I find it kind of fascinating trying to figure out what they could be. One theory is that they may be extraterrestrial, because the big black eyes, you normally think of aliens. The gray aliens, normally have those big bulbous black eyes. So it's possible they could be extraterrestrials, or like hybrids, half human, half extraterrestrial. It's possible they could be ghosts, spirits of children who um, passed in some bad way. It could be demonic or evil, um, trying to get in. Like I said, anything negative, has to be invited. It cannot do harm to you unless it's invited. So that once again plays into these negative. It could be something negative, some kind of negative entities um, that are trying to gain access to you. Um, but I guess that's a warning to the wise. If you encounter the black-eyed children, make sure you don't let them in your car, in your home. But yeah, that's pretty much what I have to talk about today. If you want me to talk about anything specific, you have a question about, I had someone that asked me about the elevator game, and I did a episode on the elevator game, and this lamb girl who was in that YouTube video that died at a hotel, um, and they caught her on the video camera in the elevator. Lucy Lamb, I believe it was, and but yeah, anything you want me to talk about, just tell me, and I'll go into depth, and I'll make sure to let you know that I did do a live show on it, and you could watch it live, or um, I think that would be better for me to really go into detail than just sort of typing you a message. But um, yeah, like I said, I kind of know a lot about a little bit of everything pertaining to the paranormal, extraterrestrials, ghosts, you name it. So, but yeah, have a great weekend, and thanks for watching. I appreciate it, guys. Uh, Lots of love, and I just want to leave you with this though. One thing, you know, when you think about paintings, they are really just canvases with paint on it. Even some of the greatest pieces of art in history, the Mona Lisa, um, it's the Sistine Chapel. Really, they were just, they were just some cheap paint on a canvas or on a wall. So when you think about it, paintings are really all the same when you get down to the physicalities of it. That a painting is nothing more than a canvas and a bunch of cheap paint put on it, put together. Um, and it's not until you step back that you actually see the picture on the canvas and you see that it is a picture. And in the same way, we're all like canvases, physically, we're all just flesh and bone and blood, and um, we are all the same. No one's better than another person. But what makes us valuable, what makes us sort of iconic, like the Mona Lisa, is that we have the ability to paint. We paint ourselves how we want to be seen. We sort of paint the picture we want people to see, and that sometimes to see the picture that someone is painting, you have to step back to see it, and you have to realize that we are all the same, when you get down to it, and that really it's about the picture that we paint and what our spirit is, and what we see when we step back and we look at that person. And that plays into, not judging a person by their body or their physical appearance, but understanding that we are all the same, but it's really the spirit that counts, and it's about the picture you see, not what the picture is, but what it became and what it can become. So essentially, remember, you are the artist who paint your own pictures of how people perceive you. And that was just a little note I wanted to leave you with today. So have a great day, and I am out. Peace out, guys.